Welcome to Manchester, 1842, where simply breathing the air will kill you by the age of 17.
It is 4 a.m. in the soot-blackened labyrinth of Ancoats, and the freezing Lancashire wind cuts straight through your tattered wool dress. You wrap your arms tight around your chest, listening to the crinkle of scavenged street newspapers you have tied beneath your clothing, just to block the bitter damp. The dense, oily smog of Manchester is so impenetrable this winter morning that you cannot even see the end of the long bamboo pole you hold in your hands. You navigate the pitch-black slum alleys entirely from memory. You are a knocker-up. Your survival depends on staring into the dark, finding the upper-story windows of the mill workers, and tapping the heavy iron wire of your pole against the glass. You must do this in absolute, terrifying silence. Local magistrates brutally suppress any gatherings in the streets, and making a sound risks drawing the newly formed borough police. Arrest means the New Bailey prison for vagrancy, or worse, the Manchester Union workhouse. Entering the workhouse means they shave your head. It means you will spend the rest of your short life crushing bones for fertilizer. So, you keep quiet. To stay awake in the freezing fog, you chew slowly on scraps of raw ginger. Coffee and tea are unimaginable luxuries here in the Cottonopolis. You stand shivering in the dark, your bare feet deeply scarred from industrial waste, striking the glass above to wake the others for their shifts. You know the sadistic system of fines. If you fail to wake a worker and they are 5 minutes late, the ruthless overlookers will steal half a day's wages from them. You make sure they are awake. But you are not standing out here in the freezing alleyway out of kindness. You are walking the streets because your own body can no longer survive the roaring machines waiting inside. Before the bamboo pole, there was the scutching room. You remember the 14-hour shifts inside the windowless brick walls of the mill. The air in there was not just dirty. It was a suffocating, perpetual snowstorm of flying cotton fibers. You breathed that toxic white dust every single day. The mechanized looms roared so deafeningly that human voices ceased to exist. You and the other women had to learn to read lips, moving your mouths silently through the dense, oily smog of the factory floor. Time itself was a weapon. To maximize profits, the mill owners would arbitrarily alter the factory clocks, moving the hands backward during your shift. They stole extra hours of unpaid labor from your exhausted body. You could do nothing but watch the massive leather driving belts turn, terrified of the factory ghost, the legend of a worker caught and crushed in those very belts, whose screams were said to echo in the whirring gears at midnight. Then came the brown lung, bisonosis. Every Monday morning, an agonizing tightness seized your chest. It felt exactly as though invisible iron bands were crushing your ribs. You tried to work through the pain. You tried to hide the heavy, rattling cough. But there are no minimum wage or medical laws to protect you here. The moment your lungs finally gave out, you were abruptly fired. No compensation, not a single penny. You were simply discarded into the streets of 1842, right in the middle of a severe economic depression. The punishing corn laws have artificially inflated the price of wheat, forcing you to survive on stirabout, a thin, tasteless gruel made of cheap oatmeal and polluted water. But starvation is a slow killer, and you needed pennies today to avoid the workhouse, which meant descending into the darkest, most foul places the city had to offer. Before the knocker-up pole, before the winter froze the streets, there was the river. You became a bone grubber. Driven by the threat of the workhouse, you wade knee-deep into the sluggish, unnatural currents of the River Irk. The water is a sickly purple today, choked with chemical runoff from the nearby dye works. The sludge burns your bare legs. It is a slow, acidic sting dumped by the local tanneries, eating away at your exhausted body. But you cannot stop. You must meticulously sift through the toxic mud. You are hunting for the rotting carcasses of horses or the bloating bodies of stray dogs that constantly wash down from the open street gutters. You plunge your bare hands into the filth, tearing the bones free to sell for a single halfpenny to the local soap boilers. And the river is getting crowded. The 1842 Mines and Collieries Act has just passed. A sudden, desperate influx of displaced female coal miners is flooding into Manchester. They are hungry. They are clawing through the exact same acidic mud. Above you, the city is tearing itself apart. The plug plot riots are erupting. Starving workers are pulling the plugs from factory boilers, desperate to halt the smoke-belching machines. You hear the shouts, the panic, the brutal suppression by the borough police echoing down the riverbanks. You look down at the purple water. Toxic green gas bubbles up from the depths of the Irk. You firmly believe it is the breath of the devil himself, punishing the city for its unnatural, steam-powered greed. Then the riverbed hides a trap. You step down, hard. A rusted piece of scrap iron catches your foot. The pain is sudden, sharp, and sickening. You do not dare look at the damage. You drag yourself out of the purple sludge and collapse against the brick wall of a nearby alley. The throbbing agony in your foot is blinding. Desperate, you attempt to stop the bleeding the only way a cellar dweller knows how. You pack the open wound with dirty cobwebs and toxic black soot scraped directly from the filthy bricks. You press your trembling, grease-stained hands against your foot, sitting alone in the acidic mud, waiting for the infection you know is coming. You drag your infected foot back to the slum of Ancoats. The rapid expansion of the railways has demolished entire neighborhoods, pushing you deeper into this overcrowded, disease-ridden labyrinth. Home is a rented cellar. There are no windows here. The dirt floor constantly oozes with raw sewage, seeping in from the overflowing cesspit next door. To survive the biting damp, your only source of heat is a small, smoky fire. You build it from coke and scavenged cinder dust. The thick smoke coats your already ruined lungs with yet another layer of black grime. You sleep huddled on a miserable mattress stuffed with cheap straw and factory sweepings. You spend the few dark hours you have constantly scratching at the bedbugs and lice that thrive in the unventilated room. Hygiene is a luxury that does not exist. There are no private toilets. You share a single, horrifyingly full privy with over 100 other slum dwellers. The ammonia fumes physically burn your eyes every time you approach the wooden door. When you try to wash your single layer of tattered wool clothing, you use water drawn from the river. The fabric simply takes on the sickly purple stain of the dye works. The city is slowly poisoning you from the inside out. Your teeth are decaying rapidly. The cheap bread you buy to survive is heavily adulterated with alum and chalk, designed by bakers to make the rotting flour look deceptively whiter. You sometimes boil a foul-smelling broth made from slink meat, the gray, diseased flesh of premature or dying calves, perfectly legal for butchers to sell. To dull the gnawing hunger and the agonizing pain in your chest, you occasionally buy a penny glass of gin. But it is not liquor. It is a harsh concoction heavily adulterated with turpentine and sulfuric acid. When the coughing gets worse, you seek out the local apothecaries. They sell cheap, dark cures for lung disease. You drink it down, desperate for relief. But the syrup is nothing more than a lethal mixture of opium, treacle, and arsenic. It leaves the exhausted workers helplessly addicted and deeply, permanently poisoned. When the factory whistles finally stop, the real terror begins. Nighttime in Ancoats brings a suffocating, heavy silence. You sit alone in your cellar, listening to the damp, corrosive air settling outside. It is so toxic that the iron hinges on your wooden door regularly rust completely through, snapping into pieces within a matter of months. You are trapped inside with the invisible killers. Cholera is a constant, terrifying shadow. You watch through the cracks in the rotting wood as your neighbors turn a ghastly shade of blue, their bodies shutting down within hours of drinking from the neighborhood pump. There is no money for a real doctor here. Your only medical advice comes from the slums' wise woman. She prescribes swallowing live spiders to cure your chronic factory fever. It is madness, but you do it anyway. You lean into the dark folklore of the cellar dwellers. You place a bowl of sliced onions beneath your straw mattress, hoping to draw out the lethal miasma causing typhus. Deep in your apron pocket, your fingers trace the rough shape of a dried mole's paw. You carry it desperately, praying the macabre charm will protect you from a sudden, fatal lung hemorrhage. Outside, desperate mothers hang bags of strong-smelling camphor around their necks to ward off the cholera. It does absolutely nothing against the contaminated water. But surviving the disease only means you must survive the night. You press yourself against the brick walls, actively avoiding the terrifying resurrection men. They are grave robbers, secretly prowling the overflowing Ancoats cemetery in the dark, hunting fresh corpses to sell to anatomy schools. You hold your breath as the night soil man passes by, his horrific cart of human waste frequently spilling over the cobblestones right outside your door. You scavenge the city to survive, but the city scavenges you back. While searching for scraps, you once uncovered the horrifying remnants of a rat pit, a blood-stained basement where locals gambled away their miserable wages, watching terriers tear apart hundreds of dock rats. And you know the horrifying truth of the baker's shop window. That sparkling white sugar is sometimes bulked out with ground animal bones, the very same bones you pull from the toxic riverbanks. The night eventually ends, but the nightmare simply resets. The sun will never truly rise over Manchester. You stand back out in the pitch-black streets at 4:30 a.m., staring up at the monolithic, smoke-spewing factories. The air is so heavy, you can taste the sulfur and raw coal on your tongue. Under strict local bylaws, these massive factory chimneys are supposed to be built tall enough to disperse the smoke into the upper atmosphere, but the mill owners intentionally build them shorter to save money. They trap the toxic smog permanently at street level, ensuring you breathe every single ounce of their profit. As you clutch your knocker-up pole, you watch the eccentric crossing sweepers emerge from the freezing gloom. They aggressively demand copper coins from wealthy gentlemen, just to clear a small walking path through the ankle-deep horse manure covering the cobblestones. In the shadows, you see desperate, out-of-work weavers standing silently in the freezing rain. It is illegal to beg aggressively, so they stand perfectly still next to their ruined, dismantled looms. They hold soaked placards detailing their starvation, terrified of arrest but with nowhere else to go. You cannot even legally gather fuel to warm your own decaying body. Local magistrates have criminalized gleaning coal scraps from the newly laid railway tracks. You risk a severe beating from the guards just for picking up a discarded rock of coal to burn in your filthy cellar. There is no escape from this iron cage. Queen Victoria's government turns a blind eye as Manchester's population explodes past 300,000. It is a sprawling, inescapable labyrinth of soot-blackened brick, built entirely on the broken backs of the desperate. You listen to the distant, deafening roar of the mechanized looms starting up again for the morning shift, a sound that will outlive everyone who works them. You realize the horrific truth of 1842. The city itself is a massive, relentless machine. And you are not a citizen. You are not a person. You are merely a broken, discarded gear slowly rusting away in its toxic shadow.